This week's solution looks like quite a chunky workflow, but there's actually just quite a lot of repetition going on. And the grouping functions that you can see here, these little folder steps, if I just zoom in to give you a better look, then they are kind of useful for us to be able to copy and paste lots of steps at once and make use of those across different inputs. So they've been a real help this week for this challenge. I hope that you found that too. So let's go ahead and start at the beginning with all of these many inputs. How have we got so many inputs when we only had 2 inputs to start with? Well, that's all thanks to the data interpreter here. So because we're working with Excel files, then Tableau Prep can kind of try and find smaller tables within that to help us out, because we know that we've got basically 3 rows of tables with 4 tables going across, if you like. We've got sort of January to April in our top row, and then we've got May to August in our second row, and we've got September to December in our bottom row. And so Tableau Prep's able to go and identify those 3 different rows of tables. It's not quite found sort of the 12 individual tables, but this is good enough for us to start with, right? So this is with the boys' names. So we're starting with the boys' data set up here. So if I just show you what that's looking like at the moment. So we've basically got our month name and then the columns rank, name, and count for each month going across. So it's pretty obvious that we're going to need to restructure this data set to get a field for our month names. So if I just expand our group out, then first of all, we're doing a little bit of filtering, just getting rid of the null here. So we'd click on the null and we'd hit exclude. That's all we're doing in this step here. And then we're doing a pivot. We're doing a multiple pivot here. So we're using the wildcard pivot feature to say every field with rank in it, every field with name in it, and every field with count in it. And that's just going to do those multiple pivots so that we end up with our 4 columns remaining here, which is really nice and neat. And I love that feature that I only found a few weeks ago, really. So just to add in, if we had any fields left, add in another pivot, we could just hit this plus here, and we'd be away with adding in our multiple pivots. So we've got all that. We just need to tidy up the naming convention a little bit. So our pivot 1 names obviously had the word rank after it because that was the first field we pivoted on. So yours might have a different name. But we just want to get rid of that, so we could use a calculation, for example, to do that, replace the word rank with nothing. But I chose to use the automatic split here because that's clever enough to realize that we don't want the word rank in every single row. So it just kind of gets rid of that for us and splits it off. So we do some renaming and get rid of the pivot 1 name fields. Now that's for our January to April table. We can literally just copy and paste this to make use of it basically across those different tables. So something to note when you're copying and pasting a group. Now then, I've copy and pasted that. Let me just bring in an input. It's going to put it to the bottom, isn't it? Yes, it has. We'll just drag that up here. And I try and drag it next to make that little add button appear, but it doesn't actually let me. I actually have to expand my grouping to add that in. So that's just a little quirk that I'm not sure why that happens, but it took me a few minutes of why is that happening? So just be aware of when you're using groups, and then you can expand and collapse it again as before, but just something to remember. So we've basically prepared all of our boys data now, boys names data. We union them in together, and we just add in a gender field for boys, and we're quite happy with how that's worked out. Now we're moving on to the girls. So for the girls, you can see that we've got 6 tables that it's found. That's a bit perplexing. Why have there been 6 tables? Because it hasn't exactly gone away and found each individual month, because then we'd have 12. So 6 seems an odd number. So if we take a look at our first input for the girls, then you can see that we've got much the same as what we had for the boys. But you can see we've actually only got the numbers 1 to 9 going on here. Okay, where's 10? Maybe we'll find it in another one of these tables. So we go ahead and we just use these steps. That's why they're coloured the same. we just copied and pasted them to reuse them, union them together, and sort of we've got our clean girls data set, but we're definitely missing some of the values from the Excel file. So let's take a look at these remaining 3 tables. They are in order here. So this one here is this one here, etc., etc. This bottom one, it refers to this bottom one. Let's take a look at one of those inputs, shall we? Oops, didn't mean to add an aggregate on. Let's delete that and add a clean step instead. Lovely. So we can see that our field names here are 10, Mia, and 187. Okay, that looks like a ranking of number 10 for the name Mia with 187 count associated with it. So this is clearly one of the additional rows that was mentioned in the challenge that isn't being pulled through into our table, which is unfortunate. So what are we going to do? Well, we're going to retain this information by, first of all, we're going to pivot. So we just literally have to drag over all of the fields that are in the data set there. So the 10, 187, and Mia, and that creates this pivot here. And then we're going to use some logic to sort of work out which ones are which. So which is the name. We use a bit of regex to determine, well, which one contains only, letters. Then we can name that one name. If the number is less than or equal to 10, then we can assume that's the ranking, otherwise it's the count. And we actually don't need the pivot one values because that's just our totals that we want to get rid of anyway. So then we can rows to column pivot this so that we get this in sort of the same data structure as was up here in our union at the end. The only thing we're missing is the month. So we do that for all of the inputs basically that come in. The last one, the final one, we actually only need to get rid of the total here before we can union all of these kind of extra outliers together. So how do we find out which month they go with? Because it's not very clear. So actually, what we can go ahead and do now, if we kind of manipulate this ranking to be a numeric field, then we can use a join on with all the girls' data that's unioned together, and we can join on both the count and the rank because the tie will mean that we will find what month this belongs to. So if we just delete the majority of the other fields that come through, then we have the month field coming through now by itself. Then we can just union this in together, add on the fact that it is the girls' names, so adding a calculated field there, union it up with the boys' names, and we can output this for our monthly rank data set straight away. For our yearly rank data set, all we need to do is group on the gender and the name and sum the count before doing ourselves a little ranking on the count, grouping it by gender and having it as a dense rank because that's how the data set was ranked before. And we just want to filter so that we only have the top 10 for both the boys and the girls. And that's how we get our second output. So as I said, nothing really too complicated, just a little bit of thinking about how to bring in these extra rows that get split into a different table. But I hope that was an enjoyable challenge. I love taking strange data sets and seeing how we can manipulate them in Tableau Prep to be something that Tableau Desktop could actually use. So thank you for watching.